In today's video, I'm going to talk about the games that I beat, that I fully completed in the fourth quarter of 2020, being October, November, and December. And there are 21 games, and we're going to go through them at breakneck speed, so let's go ahead and jump right in. Now, a quick disclaimer before we get into the list of games. A vast majority of these games I did not record gameplay footage for because I just didn't have the time or the hard drive space to do so. And of course, a lot of the Switch games that I played and beat on the Nintendo Switch Lite, which you can't record gameplay footage from that. But you will see trailer footage and some other gameplay footage as I talk about each game. And another thing, because there's 21 games I'm going to be talking about in today's video that I beat in the fourth quarter of 2020, I'm not going to go into great detail about each game because then the video would be a billion hours long. So I'm only going to talk for maybe 30 to 45 seconds on each game. And with that, let's go ahead and get into the first game. Next up is Death Stranding, which I played on the PS4. I've never been a huge Kojima or Metal Gear Solid fan. However, from the beginning, I was intrigued by the strange game that is Death Stranding. And when I saw the first gameplay trailer and finally learned what the game was, I was sold and I knew it was a game I would enjoy. I was not let down as the story and characters in Death Stranding gripped me from the opening scenes, and it was an emotional roller coaster all through my 30+ hour playthrough. There were so many unique and original ideas in Death Stranding, and the story and gameplay was unlike any game I had ever played, and it just kept evolving and becoming more and more captivating the more I played. I know Death Stranding is not a game for everyone, but it was a game for me and easily one of my favorite games I played in 2020. Next up is Kunai, which I played on the Nintendo Switch. Kunai is an indie action-adventure Metroidvania where you play as an AI robot tasked with destroying an evil AI. What a fantastic indie game. The combat, the controls are fast and fluid, the world is fun to explore, and the game is pretty damn challenging as well. As you progress, you gain new weapons and abilities that enable you to explore even more of the world, and your grappling hooks enable you to very quickly get around. Using your guns and sword, you will slice, dice, and shoot your way through a fun and epic adventure full of charm. The pixel art and music were both fantastic, and I had so much fun playing through Kunai, and I wish more people talked about it because it is a game that deserves far more praise and recognition than it gets. There's actually a free demo on the Switch eShop, so please check it out. Next up is the Angry Video Game Nerd Adventures 1 and 2 Deluxe on the Nintendo Switch. I played and beat Angry Video Game Nerd Adventures 1 and 2 via the Deluxe release on the Switch, and I'm not going to go into too much detail here because I did a review video on the entire package, which I will leave a link to in the description down below. I will say this though, AVGN 1 and 2 are both fantastic retro-style 2D platformers with top-notch pixel art and music, super fun gameplay, and they are love letters to both the NES era of gaming as well as AVGN. The games are both hard as nails and the gameplay is just so damn fun. I highly recommend this package, especially if you're a fan of AVGN and games from the NES era. I had a blast playing and beating both games as well as the new final chapter. Next up is Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, which I played on the PS4. Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order is another game on the PS4 backlog I have wanted to get to, and I finally played and beat it. If I had to describe Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, I would say 3D Zelda games, Dark Souls, Tomb Raider, Metroid Prime, and Star Wars had an orgy, and the baby was Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order. Yeah, sorry for the visual. It is a fantastic game with incredible combat and exploration, a top-notch Star Wars story, really cool boss fights, and an amazing presentation. It is a fairly difficult game too, which is where the Dark Souls influence comes in. Exploring each planet and solving the puzzles is an absolute joy and almost made me want to 100% the game. The ending is incredibly epic and I enjoyed every moment of my playthrough of Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order. It is probably one of the best Star Wars games I have ever played. Next up is Superman Shadow of Apokolips, which I played on the Nintendo GameCube. I'm not going to go into too much detail here because I made an episode of GameCube Gallery on Superman Shadow of Apokolips, reviewing it, which I will leave a link to in the description down below. Needless to say, this is not a very good game and it has a lot of issues, but it is actually a halfway decent Superman game if you can overlook its flaws. Outside of the major frustrations, I actually enjoyed playing through it at times, but at the same time, I will never play it again. The sad thing is that this is probably one of the best Superman games ever made, and that's not saying much. Check out my review video for more information. Next up is Uncharted, the Nathan Drake Collection, which I played and beat all 3 games in that trilogy on the PlayStation 4. So one super popular video game series I never got into in the past was the Uncharted series, mainly because I never had a PS3, so I missed out on the Sony exclusives from that era. I recently decided to change that, and I decided to play through the entire Uncharted series and binge play every game, so that's what I did. Of course, I started with Uncharted 1 and I really enjoyed it, and it pulled me into the series immediately. Now, I've always heard that Uncharted 1 was the weakest entry in the series, even though it's still a great game, and I tend to agree with that, but it was still a great introduction into Nathan Drake, Sully, and Elena. Then I played Uncharted 2, and holy hell, that game was insanely epic from start to finish. It was bigger and better than Uncharted 1 in literally every single way, and that is where the series really began to hit its stride. Uncharted 3 was also fantastic, although not quite as good as Uncharted 2. Uncharted 3 digs into Nathan and Sully's past a bit, which was definitely interesting, and it helped set up Uncharted 4. I absolutely love the characters, story, and dialogue in the Uncharted games. The action and gunplay is intense and super fun, and the exploration and puzzle elements are really good as well. Nathan Drake is an awesome and fun character, and the presentation and action set pieces in these games are epic. Next up is Uncharted Golden Abyss, which I played on the PlayStation Vita. Uncharted Golden Abyss on the PlayStation Vita is an interesting game in several ways. First off, it was a prequel to the first Uncharted game. Secondly, it was not developed by Naughty Dog. And third, it utilized the PlayStation Vita's unique control options such as the backpad, front touchpad, and motion controls in cool ways for the gameplay. Uncharted Golden Abyss felt and played very much like Uncharted 1, and it was the easiest game in the series by far. Even though I really enjoyed Uncharted Golden Abyss, it was definitely my least favorite in the series, and I probably won't play it again. Next up is Uncharted 4, which I actually played on the PlayStation 5. Uncharted 4 is easily my favorite Uncharted game in literally every single way. It brings Uncharted to next gen on the PS4 for the first time, and it's bigger and better than ever. It has my favorite story out of any Uncharted game and some of my favorite action set pieces, and the final boss fight is so damn awesome. And the very end of the game sets up some interesting things for a potential Uncharted 5, which I hope is in the works right now. Uncharted 4 is a game I could see myself playing through again in the near future, and it is easily one of my favorite games that I played in 2020. And then we have Uncharted The Lost Legacy, which I played on the PlayStation 5. Uncharted The Lost Legacy is the first and only Uncharted game to not star Nathan Drake as the main protagonist. You play as Chloe Fraser, joined by Nadine from Uncharted 4 as your sidekick, and it is also the shortest Uncharted game, but it is incredibly fun. It's also the first Uncharted game to really feature an incredibly massive open-ended area to explore, almost as if Naughty Dog were experimenting with an open world Uncharted game. So let me tell you how I order all the Uncharted games from my least favorite to my favorite. Uncharted Golden Abyss is my least favorite, then we have Uncharted 1, Uncharted 3, Uncharted The Lost Legacy, Uncharted 2 is my second favorite, and finally Uncharted 4 is my favorite. Next up is Astros Playroom, which I played of course on the PlayStation 5. Astros Playroom was one of the few 100% PS5 exclusive games, and it was also included for free with the PlayStation 5 console. It is essentially a 3D platformer meant to show off the technology and new features of the PlayStation 5 and the DualSense controller, but it's also an absolutely brilliant and fun game. The graphics, music, level design, and gameplay are all amazing, and Astros Playroom is an absolute love letter to the legacy of all things PlayStation. The game is packed full of tons of PlayStation themed unlockables that you can interact with, and there are PlayStation themed Easter eggs packed all over the place, referencing just about every well-known PlayStation game you can possibly think of. It is a short and sweet game that I think every fan of the PlayStation should play. Next up is Spider-Man Miles Morales, which I played on the PlayStation 5. Spider-Man Miles Morales was an absolute blast to play through on the PS5, and it really showcased the power and speed of the console. The game itself was much shorter than the last Spider-Man, but it was so damn good from start to finish that I didn't mind. Miles Morales is such a fun and cool character, and his powers you use in combat were so much fun, and so he felt very much different than Spider-Man in the previous game. The story was fantastic, and I had so much fun that I actually 100%ed the game. After playing and beating both Spider-Man and Spider-Man Miles Morales, this has me excited for what the next game in the franchise will be. I'm hoping for a co-op campaign. That would be epic. Next up, I played and beat Ratchet & Clank, and I played it on the PS5. I randomly decided to play and beat the 2016 Ratchet & Clank reimagining on the PS4 for the first time, and holy hell am I glad I did. The 2016 Ratchet & Clank remake is such an epic and fantastic game with AAA production values, and it is so damn fun. I had an absolute blast playing through, and if not for the fact that I needed to move on to other games, I probably would have started a new Game Plus so that I could finish upgrading all the weapons. After playing and beating Ratchet & Clank, I am even more hyped for Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart on the PS5 when it drops in 2021. Next up is Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity, which I played, of course, on the Nintendo Switch. Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity was an absolute addicting blast from beginning to end through my 25-ish hour playthrough. It was really cool to play through the events of Calamity Ganon that took place before Breath of the Wild, and the gameplay was so much fun with all the different characters you could fight as. Each character felt very unique, and towards the end of the game, in the last few missions, it was so damn epic, and it was basically all-out war. Even beyond the main campaign, there's so much more content to play through, and I could see myself going back to try and 100% it at some point. The funny thing is that I've never been much of a fan of Warrior-style games, but I just could not put down Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity. Next up is Ys Origin, which I played and beat, of course, on the Nintendo Switch. Ys Origin is a re-release from the PC in 2006, and it serves as a complete prequel to the Ys series, and it is a dungeon-crawling action RPG with a great story. The gameplay is simple while also being a lot of fun, and the massive tower you play the game in is an absolute blast to explore. Ys Origin actually has a really good story as well, full of twists and turns, and the boss fights are massive and fun as hell. After you beat the game as one of the two playable characters, you can play as the other character, and the story changes quite a bit, and then there is even a third unlockable character, so there's plenty of content to sink your teeth into, and I may play it again in a month or two with the other character. Next up is Immortals Fenyx Rising, which I played and beat on the PlayStation 5. Immortals Fenyx Rising was one of my most anticipated games of 2020 because it was basically Ubisoft's Breath of the Wild clone, and you know what? The game did not disappoint me at all. The story was interesting and fun, although the dialogue was cheesy as hell and the voice acting was not great, but the characters were at least fun and interesting. The world was massive and there was so much to explore and find. Combat was incredibly fun, and even after 40 hours I was still progressing my character with new upgrades and abilities. It may not be as good as Breath of the Wild, but damn, it's the best Breath of the Wild clone out there, and I enjoyed every bit of the 40 hours it took me to beat it. Next up is Super Epic The Entertainment War on the Nintendo Switch. Super Epic The Entertainment War is a 2D Metroidvania action game where you play as a raccoon riding a llama who sets out to destroy an evil game corporation run by pigs. This evil game corporation preys on its players with games full of microtransactions, loot boxes, gambling, and more, so this game is full of parody and commentary on such greedy practices in the gaming industry. The game itself is also an absolute blast with fantastic pixel art and music, a really fun world to explore. The combat is a lot of fun with a large variety of moves at your disposal, and the character progression is very well done. Super Epic The Entertainment War is an indie game that really surprised me with just how fun it was, and I had a blast playing through it. It's a game that I never hear anyone talk about, which is a shame. I highly recommend it. Next up is Detroit Become Human, which I played on the PlayStation 5. When I received my PlayStation 5, I checked out the PlayStation Plus collection you have access to for being a PlayStation Plus member, and I decided to download and play Detroit Become Human for the first time. I knew practically nothing about the game other than the fact that it is basically an interactive movie where you make choices and there are ramifications for your choices. Well, it ended up containing one of the best stories I've ever experienced in a video game, and the whole game was an emotional roller coaster. The choices you make are permanent, and some can result in major characters dying, and there is no going back, so this results in an incredibly intense experience as you make choices on the fly within time limits. There is so much I could say about Detroit Become Human, and it will end up being a game that I probably play at least once per year. Next game I beat is Wario World on the GameCube. Wario World is something of an enigma, as it is the only 3D Wario game, and besides Wario Land Shake It on the Wii, this is the last platforming Wario game we have received. Wario World is not only a fantastic Wario game full of humor and Wario's insanity, but it's also a fantastic 3D platformer, although it is very short and easy. I had so much fun playing and beating Wario World, especially in some of the more unique levels and boss fights. I just wish the game was longer, but I'm not going to go into too much detail as there will be an episode of GameCube Gallery on Wario World in the near future, so stay tuned for that. Next up is Control, which I played on the PlayStation 5. Control is the last game I beat in 2020, and yet another PS4 game that was on my backlog to play, and holy hell am I glad I did. Control is such a strange, creepy, and just plain weird third-person shooter action adventure game that honestly going into it, I did not know what to expect because I had never watched any videos on the game and I didn't know much about it. The guns are all very fun and unique, and the powers you acquire like levitation, telekinesis, the shield, and so on are all really fun. Combat is fast, fun, and sometimes quite difficult, and I just love the paranormal, philosophical, and scientific aspects of the strange story. Control was a fantastic game, and I enjoyed every bit of it, and it was a great way to top off the games I beat in 2020. Whew, there you have it, folks. Those are the 21 games that I beat in the fourth quarter of 2020. Now, all together in 2020, I completed 46 games, which for me, as busy as I am, that's a lot of games to beat in a year. Now, that's not all the games I played in 2020. I played a hell of a lot more games than 46, but I completed 46 games. And you know what? I'm proud of that. It's probably going to be a lot lower next year because next year is going to be an even busier year for me, but I'm still going to try to beat at least a few games a quarter next year. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure and hit that like button. Let me know in the comments down below what games you've beat in the fourth quarter of 2020. Also, let me know in the comments down below what games you're working on beating right now. I would love to hear that. If you're new here, consider subscribing so that you can join the Retro Wolf family. And as always, folks, stay safe out there, keep playing games and having a good time, and I'll catch you all in the next video. Later.